Lots of extremely fantastic news for people who love Warhammer 40,000. Yesterday, we heard the release of freaking Dawn of War 4. Yay. But more importantly to me and to many of you is today we get information about how they're going to fix the game because in all reality, we are currently in the most toxic meta that 10th edition has had outside of on-release Eldar. So, GW has gone ahead and released a fix for Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, Death Guard. I'm going to go ahead and give you what all those fixes are, and I'm going to talk about whether it's enough or if they need more. In addition to that, Games Workshop has also revealed that the balance data slate is not due until next month, and they're not going to deliver it until next month. But they're going to go ahead and give us the points changes for these three armies right now, simply because they also had to go ahead and release the points for Votann, so that Votann can be a playable army with their new codex. So we'll go through all of the points changes, and we'll break all that down. Basically, Games Workshop, when they were going through this, they said, in the last few weeks, it's become apparent that three factions, IK, CK, and Death Guard, are having the run of the field. Oh, has that become apparent, Games Workshop? Has that become apparent? Yeah. If this was an Orcs army that had been this overpowered, it would have been nerfed within 2 days. It would have taken 2 months, but that's okay. Yes, I'm a little salty. Basically, they just wanted to do some targeted changes. They just go on in this article, and as soon as we're done with this article, I'm going to show you guys the actual points, and we'll talk about them as well. So they said they're targeted changes. The primary challenge is points across the Knights codexes just went down a little too low on average, enabling too many large Knights and vehicle chassis to be present on the battlefield. As a result, we've changed the points of the bigger Chaos and Imperial Knights by between 15 and 30 points each to bring the total number of big Knights down. The Cerastus and Questoris have gone up between 30 and 40. Canis went up by 35. That's not enough. And the Wartborn Stalker enhancement has been raised by 15 points. And then in addition, they just definitely gave some points increases to Death Guard, which is very, very needed. But is it enough? Well, let's just jump right into it. So we have the Munitorium Field Manual. Let's just fix the screen here for a moment. I'm just going to scroll down. Nothing's changed except for the four armies. It has changed for Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, Death Guard, and the Leagues of Votann. So let's just scroll, and I think the Chaos Knights will be the first one that we actually get to talk about. Blah, 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 blah. Chaos Knights. Here we go. Make sure you guys can see that on screen. Okay, so Chaos Knights, you see a whole bunch of red there, which is a good thing because we need a little bit of red for the Chaos Knights. Now, Chaos Knights are not nearly as, I would say, overpowered as the Imperial Knights are right now, but they are very, very darn good still. So it's very nice that they addressed all the Knights and not just Imperial Knights, because had they only nerfed Imperial Knights, well, then we're just going to have our Wartborn Stalkers to immediately reclaim the throne or take the throne. So this was good. This was good. They did a good job. I'm actually quite happy about that. Okay, so let's just go through these sequentially, or not sequentially. That was the wrong word. Whatever, you guys know what I'm saying. All right, so the Knight Abominant went up by 30 points. Good change. Knight Abominants, this is probably about correct for the Knight Abominants profile. You saw a bunch of armies that were running triple Knight Abominants, and that gets very, very abusive because you can just spam the battle shocks in the shooting phase. You can get their D3 mortals that everything enemy unit takes within 9 inches of them at the end of the movement phase is not an aura, which means it stacks. So when you have 3 Knight Abominants, you can, depending on how you move them, you can actually get like your entire opponent's army to take 3d3 mortals. You got to roll dice, obviously, but it got very, very abusive. So this is going to not make that an impossible combination to do, but it's going to increase that combination by 90 points, which is significant. So I would say that this is a good change. I like it. I think it probably could have been 40, but 30, I think that's a good change. Knight Desecrator went up by 30. I don't think this is very consequential. It's not really a knight that we were seeing. The next one is the one that we were really seeing dominate, which is the Knight Despoiler, who went up by 40 points. This is probably going to be about correct in the context of the other dogs that went up. This is probably going to be about correct. Perhaps they could have used an extra 10, but this is enough to make a significant impact. Now, I can already hear people in the chat. They're saying, oh, but you can still run 4 big Knights. Yeah, you can still run 4 big Knights. But if you're running 4 big Knights, you're not going to also be running 4 to 5 little Knights, which is very, very nice. This is also going to make it so that you can't necessarily take the enhancements that you want with the big Knights, which is also a very, very big deal. The Rampager went up by 30 points. This is the close combat guy who did all the big melee. That's probably very correct for him. Generally speaking, your melee knights can tend to not have to go up quite as much. Lancer accepted. So this is probably actually almost perfect for the Knight Rampager. When we look at the Knight Ruinator went up by 25 points. Now, in my opinion, I actually don't think the Knight Ruinator needed to go up at all, simply because it's not good. Like, it's just straight up not good. But you know what? Whatever. It went up. I'm not gonna. It doesn't hurt my feeling that the Knight Ruinator went up as well. Let me just pull up his profile for just a second. 4 attacks at strength 6. You get to choose one unit that you get to reroll wound rolls against. Yeah. Yeah, he's not very good. His aura is pretty decent, I guess. It can make war dogs get +1 AP when they're targeting the closest enemy unit. That's not bad. But yeah, he's just isn't really that strong. So I don't really think that he needed to go up in points. But yeah, it is what it is. Sorry, I think he just got hit by the fact that Knights were too strong. Knight Tyrant only goes up by 15. Now, this is something that, while it might be appropriate in Chaos Knights, we're going to see when we get to IK, its cousin only went up by the same amount of points, and that's a big problem. All right, then we see no changes to the Brigands, no changes to the Executioner or the Huntsman. These are most of the littles. The only changes we see to the littles is to the Carnivore, which is by far and away the best of the littles. So he has now gone up to 150. This is probably correct-ish. So I think that's pretty good. Then we go to all of the Forge World Knights. And Forge World Knights are not nearly as big a problem in Chaos Knights as they are in the Imperial Knights. But it's good to see that they still went up because they were still too efficient. Like in Lords of Dread, you have the fights first assault Knight Atropos, which is a pretty big issue. Seeing that Lancer go up just warms my heart because Lancers are criminally cheap right now. I don't think any of the others really mattered at all. I think they just probably increased the cost of the other knights just to make sure that people weren't able to very easily pivot. And then lastly, the other change that they increased 15 points to the Warp-born Stalker enhancement. This makes a heck of a lot of sense, because if you don't know what the Warp-born Stalker enhancement is, well, let me read you the Warp-born Stalker enhancement. Chaos Knights model only. The bearer has Deep Strike. That means you can rapid ingress a Big Knight anywhere on the battlefield. Very strong. In addition, once per battle, at the end of your opponent's turn, if the bearer is not within engagement range, you can remove it from the battlefield and place it in Strat Reserve. So for 10 points, you could have a Deep Strike and Uppy Downy enhancement on a Big Knight. Now, I definitely abused a few people with this in some TTS leagues. I didn't do it in any physical tournaments, but in some TTS leagues, I absolutely did. I put this thing on a Lancer who had the Flamer and the Harpoon, because the problem with the Harpoon is it only has 12-inch range. But when you can rapid ingress and Uppy Downy, you can very easily get within 12 inches of range, and it can absolutely abuse people's feelings. So it's good, because that was a brutally efficient enhancement, and so that needs to go up. That means that if we're going to try to put that on a Tyrant, for example, that Tyrant's going to end up being like 450 points. If you want to put it on a Despoiler, which is the other place where you really saw it, that Despoiler is going to go up to that 400-point mark. So I think that's a good change on that enhancement in particular. So overall, for Chaos Knights, who were not as oppressive as the Imperial Knights or the Death Guard, they got some significant nerfs, but it's not going to destroy the army. It's just going to make it so that they take one less unit, which I think is very reasonable. I think Chaos Knights are in a very good position. They're just not going to be top anymore, so they're just going to be in a very good position. So I think these are all reasonable changes, and GW generally did a pretty good job here. I'd like to hear what you think in the comments down below. Was it enough? Now let's talk about one that might not be quite enough, but it is a very welcome change that will change, I would say, the toxicity of some of the builds, right? So I'm just going to say right off the bat, Death Guard are still going to be too strong, but they're not going to be impossible to beat. One of the builds is going to be very hard for them to run super efficiently now, and that is the build that I think was the worst. Not because it was necessarily the strongest, but because it was, I'm going to use the word oppressive, even though it wasn't necessarily the strongest, but because it would just invalidate other armies, and that would be Mortarian's Hammer. So in Mortarian's Hammer, people were just running triple PBCs. They're going to put you within contagion range turn 1, and they're just going to bombard you to obliteration every single turn. And since that they can just put you in contagion range using the detachment rule, they could just guarantee that they get to drop, Death Shrouds 6 inches over a turn 2, which was so strong. Well, it's still strong, but it's going to be a lot more expensive to run that triple PBC build now. So I think that was really good. Now, most Death Guard players are going to take this information and they're going to go, looks like I'm just going to immediately switch into Virulent Victorum, or I'm going to go Champions of Contagion. Those are pretty good choices. This is still a very strong army. It's still probably the strongest army in the game. maybe there's an argument with IK there. We'll still talk about it, but it's going to be much easier to actually play into this. So right now in my brain, I'm looking at my armies that I play. I'm looking at, okay, this army can't beat Death Guard. It's impossible for this army to beat Death Guard. And when I say that, I'm referring to like, oh, a player of equal or at least good skill. Now it's going to be possible. It's just going to be very challenging. So while I don't think this is enough of a fix for Death Guard or IK, I do believe this is a great first step to actually see how the meta shifts around them. And now people are going to be able to come up with strategies that might be able to deal with it. So this is a overall very good change. And who knows? When we get to the balance data slate, there might be a little bit more. Maybe GW wanted to push this out there to see if it was enough first, which I applaud that. I am so done with GW doing these nuke from orbits, these orbital bombardments that just destroy armies. I don't want these armies destroyed. I just need them toned down a little bit. Now, some of these armies, like Death Guard and IK, as we're going to see, might need to have been toned down a wee bit more, but this is a great first start. So I love this style of balancing from GW. Let's be a little bit conservative, but we know we need to make some changes, and they absolutely made changes. So let's read through these. The Biologus Putrefier. If I'm not mistaken, the Biologus, is he the guy who gives fights for... I know he has the Super Flamer, but is he the guy who gives the fights first? Let me just pull him up real quick. Yeah, because he was dirt freaking cheap at 45. All right, this guy was 45. All right, first off, let me explain. This piece of garbage here, this guy gave crit hits on 5 to the entire unit, and it gave the entire unit lethal hits. That's insane. And it was only 45 points. Okay, good. So now this guy officially costs 60 points. Still an incredibly cheap and valuable character. He just gives an entire unit lethal hits on everything and crits on 5. That is so unreasonably powerful. So the unit, the model itself is just brutally effective. If I had this unit in like basically any other Space Marines army, it would cost minimum 90 points. Like minimum 90 points, but it's okay. So it went up in points. That's a good thing. Then we have Death Shroud Terminators, who went up by 20 points for 3 and 20 points for 6. So it's a 160 point unit. Much, much better. This is probably pretty close to what Death Shroud Terminators should cost. Maybe an extra 5 points on the unit or something, but 160 is probably about correct when you compare it with the cost of other Terminators. Now, they're still much more useful. The real problem when it comes to your Death Shroud is when they're combined with the Lord of Contagion, who also went up by about 10 points. This overall means that package has gone up by 30 points. So if we have a let's see, 120 plus 160, so that's going to put us at 280 for a 3-man led by a Lord of Contagion. This is much more realistic to what this unit should be costed. It's possible it should go up even slightly more, but this is a good first change because they might be correct on how much those Death Shrouds should cost with the Lord of Contagion at this point. Because they are hyper elite and they should be super strong, and they are super strong. And at this cost, you're still taking them, but it might make you think twice about wanting to take 3 squads of them. And that's really, really what we needed. So I think this is probably, if not right on the mark, very, very close to being on the mark. The bloat drones went up by 10 points. Now, this one is, you could argue that if it needs to go up to 100 or if it needs to go to 110. So I think it's fine. They went up to 100. I will just say in a very salty voice that my Def Dreads in Orcs still cost 120, which is unusable. If these guys could be 100 points, why can't a Def Dread be 100 points? Anyway, but as far as Death Guard is concerned, this is probably pretty close. Maybe they should go up another 10, but for right now, I think we're happy. Okay, so those Flesh Mowers, which were one of the most ludicrously undercosted units in the game, are now at 100 instead of 90. All right. I think those 10 points can make a big difference when they're trying to figure out that last unit. Then we have the Fetid Bloat Drones with Heavy Blight Launchers. Great. They went up by 20 points up to 120. They probably need to be 125, but you know what? 120 is basically correct. I think that's a great improvement. Good job. Now you're still going to see 3 of these taken in most Death Shroud unit or Death Guard units, simply because it's an amazing data sheet. But when it increases by 20 points, that's a 20% increase in its cost. That's pretty dang significant. So I think they did a good job there. I mean, if they're running 3 of these, basically that just means now they can't take an entire Poxwalker unit, which can be fairly traumatic to an army that doesn't necessarily have the most amount of units. So this was a good change. I think it's totally fair and totally reasonable. Defilers stayed the same, whatever. Foul Blight Spawn. Now this guy, this might be the guy with the Super Flamer, if I'm not mistaken. Let me look that one up. The Foul Blight Spawn. Yeah, he's the guy with the super flamer, and he gives fights first to the unit. All right, so he went up. Oh man, and he has that aura of you can't start or end and advance within 9 inches. Oh, so you can't advance and charge oh, that's disgusting. Man, these Death Guard characters are so strong. Um, yeah, so he went up to 75, still very, very cheap. Giving fight first to a unit, that's what a Judiciary does for 70. But in addition to that, he makes it so that he has a Super Flamer, which is amazing for Overwatch. And in addition to that, he also makes it so that you can't end an advance move within 9 inches. So it makes it very challenging to advance and charge the unit. Now, it is important to note that you can't end an advance move is within 9 inches of the model and not necessarily the unit, so you can kind of get around it, but it is very, very strong for him just to give a unit fights first, a great Overwatch potential, and that whole you can't advance within 9 inches of me was very, very brutal. So it's a good thing he went up in points. He probably needs to go up by another 5 to 10 points, but still massively appreciated change. Lord of Contagion goes up by 10. That's the guy who he gives lance and sustained hits to the Death Shroud. He is the thing that makes the Death Shroud problem. Man, he's all reality. He probably needs to be 130 still, but we're headed in the right direction. Lord of Virulence goes up by 10. I don't even know if the Lord of Virulence really needs to go up, to be honest with you. That might just be something where they were like, oh, we see everyone's taken one in Hammer because he gives the full rerolls to hit to blast weapons and he can get blown up. Maybe like, I don't know. I don't necessarily think that he actually really needed to go up, but it doesn't hurt my feelings that he did. Then we look at Mythic Blight Haulers, went up by 10. Still super, super cheap. Those are 110 units, but you know what? Right direction. Plaguebear's Crawler went up by 15. That might actually be a little too much. Might be. I think what they're doing here is they're really just trying to get people to not spam them in Mortarian's Hammer, which I kind of agree with. But if that's the problem, man, like you should change. I think that's a rules because now they're making it so like you're just not going to take PVCs in any detachment because they're going to be costed out of every detachment except for Mortarian's Hammer, which is one of the things I talked about in my previous video where I was saying, hey, if you want to. Sometimes we need to change the detachment rule and not just nerf a unit so much that it can't be used in any detachment when it's only a problem in one. So I think that might actually be a little too much, but you know what? This is just points for now. Maybe they do change something elsewhere. Foxwalkers go up by 5 points. Once again, they probably need to go to 70 to 75, but whatever. They went up by 5. That's good. Tallyman went up by 10 points. I can't believe how cheap these character models are. Typhus went up by 10 points. Okay, great. All those things went up. Nothing went down, thank goodness. And then lastly, for Mortarian's Hammer, Tendril yeah, okay, so that's why they increased the cost of the PPCs and the Lord of Virulence, because Tendril Submissions is what gives the Lord of Virulence a lone up when he's within 3 inches of a vehicle. They really just don't like the combination of people playing, 3 great indirect pieces with a lone up character who's giving 4 rerolls to hit. Guys, stop creating indirect that gets full rerolls to hit if you don't want these things. Like, just stop making those. Just stop making those units. Like, it's horrible for the game. It's been horrible in every single iteration of the game. So just stop making that. But that's why they nerf the PVCs. All right, got it. Okay. All right, so that's the Death Guard nerfs. I don't think it's enough to knock them off the top, but I definitely think it's enough to make it you're able to play into them. I do believe we're going to see a hard pivot into Virulent Vectorum, and we're going to see a hard pivot into Champions of Contagion, and we're going to see people just moving away from Mortarian's Hammer, which makes sense to me. They're still going to be very good, but now they're going to have to drop an entire unit minimum and probably change one of their other units down. So I think we're going to be able to actually play into Death Guard now. Like I said, still probably going to be about the strongest in the game, but this makes it much easier or easier is probably the wrong word, but much more obtainable to actually get victory against them. So that's good. Good changes. We'll wait for the balanced status slate in next month to see how they actually finish it all off. Then we're going to talk about Imperial Knights. All right, Imperial Knights are getting effectively the same changes that our Chaos Knights got. Now, whereas I think it was enough for the Chaos Knights, I don't think it's quite enough for the Imperial Knights. I think Imperial Knights are getting the same version of treatment that the Death Guard are getting. It's all good changes, all necessary changes, and it will make it easier to play into these armies, but it's not going to be enough to really knock them off of the top seat. Now, one thing that might happen, and this is a prediction, is that we might start seeing players who have been playing Death Guard and IK just because they're easy wins start to go back to their specialist factions, which might make win rates change a little bit. But it's still a very, very strong army. It is going to be more challenging to run Canis Rex with the 3 Atropos, but it's still going to be very doable. Because that's what we've seen, right? It's been Canis Rex, 3 Atropus, but that build itself has now gone up by 120, 100 and what is that? 155 points. That is a significant increase in cost, but that's not the only build that exists. However, I do think that we're going to see probably a reduction of like the 5 Big Knight builds. We're probably going to go back to 4 to 3 Big Knight builds, and then littles, which is a good thing. So we saw Helverin go up by 10 points. Good. The Warglaive stayed 140. I could see that Warglaive going up to 150, but it is what it is. Canis Rex goes up by 35. That's not enough. Canis Rex should have gone up by 50, but it is what it is. The Castellan, this is the big miss in my opinion. So most people they haven't seen the Castellan because just most people don't own the Castellans. But if you've played against the Castellan in Imperial Knights, he basically by himself will shut down any gunline army just by himself. Because remember, in Imperial Knights, they get to re-roll a hit roll and a wound roll natively, which means this bad boy with his huge Volcano Lance, which is like AP 6, D6 plus 8 damage, is going to one-tap anything. He's just going to one-tap anything that he shoots that doesn't have a 4-up invuln. And if you do have 4-up invuln and you don't roll the 4-up, you're still going to get one-tapped. So he by himself, when he combined with his towering keywords, can point one gun, guarantee a kill on something over here, and then point his missiles and the other things that have like the devastating wound keyword onto another to guarantee a kill in 2 different places. It's a big problem. He is too cheap in Imperial Knights. Maybe the Tyrant is okay in Chaos Knights, but in Imperial Knights, this is still too cheap. This guy needs to be 450 minimum. But like I said, it's a pivot in the correct direction at least. Crusader went up by 30, totally reasonable. Errant went up by 30. This one I find a little interesting, but that's fine. Gallant, okay. Paladin, okay. These things I don't really like. I don't really care about the Errant, Gallant, Paladin, Preceptor. They weren't really issues. The Warden I think was more of an issue, but only going up by 20 back to 385. Okay. Then we get into the Forge World Knights, and there's only 2 that matter, right? It's the same ones for Chaos Knights. It's the Atropus and it's the Lancer. Lancers are exceptionally effective. So at 395, they're still quite good value. I think we're going to see people start running more Lancers and less Atropuses. Atropuses are still really good at 405, as opposed to, what was it, 375 or something? But I think this is absolutely good stuff in the correct direction. So we might just see a pivot away from the 5 big Stumpy Knight list and move into more 4 big knights or even 3 big knights with some littles. And that's a much healthier meta for us to play into. These points might be actually correct with a Codex. If you lose like a Feel No Pain, you lose the free reroll to hit and wound, because that's really what pushes everything over to the top. So these points might be great with the Codex in mind when the Codex drops, whenever that Codex mate drops. But for right now, I think it's still going to be tied with Death Guard for the top in the game. That being said, both this and Death Guard are going to be playable now. So now we're actually going to have the opportunity to play a game, and it's not just going to be like, oh, Knights are there, they win, or Death Guard is there, they win. So I do like all these changes. I think they are really, really good. I just think there needs to be a little bit more, but definitely on the right track. And I would much prefer this type of nerf followed by a secondary nerf than the previous GW nerf, which is I'm just going to nuke you from orbit and now you don't exist. Let's talk about the one last final thing that they changed, which is going to be the Leagues of Votann. Now, I don't have really too much to say about this because I don't have much of an opinion on Leagues of Votann yet. I haven't gotten to play the new Codex. I've leafed through it. I've seen the data sheets. I've seen some of the rules. I like it. I think it's strong. I think it's good. But I don't have much to say on like what should have gone up and what should have gone down. So this is just the changes. So I'll just read them to you guys so you have them. Arcanist Evaluator down by up by 10 points. Brokir Thunderkin down by 5 and 10 for 3 or 6 model respectively. Chthonian Earthshakers went up. That one kind of confused me when I read the Earthshaker. They seemed kind of bad. Maybe I'm missing something. And like I said, I'm not particularly super knowledgeable about the leagues yet. I haven't really dove into them yet. Hackathon Land Fortress went up. Okay, fair play. Steeljacks, those going up kind of. Oh, actually, all right. When I look at what their points cost in the book was, never mind. That's probably pretty reasonable. Steeljacks with melee weapons went down, so now they cost the same. They're both 90 and 180 respectively for 3 or 6 mans. And then Uthor went up a little bit as well. This one was actually also a little interesting to me. I think overall maybe the points in the Codex were just a little too cheap in general, which is why they put them up. Not because these guys were OP or anything. It's just the points overall were just a little bit too cheap. So I think that's it. Let me just scroll to make sure there's nothing else. Yeah, so no other points changes. Now, the balanced data slate will still include rule and points changes for all the other factions if they are necessary. So since your faction wasn't shown here, that's okay. You're coming off the normally scheduled balanced data slate. Games Workshop just did everyone a good favor by saying, hey, you know what? We'll just go and we'll just kind of tone down the top right now because they are a problem in the game since we have to update the Votann anyway. I like it. So, GW, I think good job on this. I also like the conservative approach. Even though I'm here saying, it probably should have been a little bit more, it probably should have been. But it doesn't matter because this is a much healthier approach to game balance than just nuking things from orbit. IK players, CK players, Death Guard players, they can't complain about this. And if they do complain about this, flick them. Just flick them because their opinions suck if they want to complain about these changes. None of these changes ruin any of the factions. They just bring them down just enough so that other people will get to compete about them, which is a good first step. We'll see when the balanced data set comes next month what else is going to happen. So until then, everyone, thank you for sticking out. Appreciate and love you all, and I will see you on our next video. Crump on. Bye-bye.